Minaları toxum kimi az bastırın torpağa, hərəsindən bir ölüm ağacı göyərəcək. Kimin üstünə düşəcək o ağacın kölgəsi, bəlkə elə haçansa o ölüm ağacının altından öz balan keçəcək səni. Minaları toxum kimi az bastırın torpağa.
This is Azerbaijan, one of the republics of the former Soviet Union in the southern Caucasus on the Caspian Sea. The breakup of the former USSR has caused huge economic as well as political problems for many of these sister republics, as they used to be called in the old jargon. A bitter and bloody war was fought out for years between Azerbaijan and Nagorno-Karabakh, following a declaration of independence by this enclave of Azerbaijan, whose majority population is Armenian. Today, a ceasefire has put an end to active combat, but nothing is finally settled, and the tragic sequels of war are all too obvious. Israfilov Raimolu is 75 years old and a farmer. His small holding lies close to the front line. Last year, whilst he was working in his fields, he trod on a landmine planted during hostilities.
Siz uzaktan gelipsiniz öyle mi?
150 kilometre. Oğlanlarım var, kızlarım var.
I've come from a long distance away, over 150 kilometers. But despite the problems of getting here, it's been worth it. I'm head of a very large family. I have many children, 5 boys and 3 girls. And I've got many grandchildren too who need me. I'm very grateful for the opportunity that you've given me. Thanks to you all who have come so far to help us, and even though I'm 75 years old, I'm at last going to be able to stand again and work again to look after my family. What you're doing here is truly wonderful, you know. There are many young people in this centre. They dream of one thing only, to be able to throw away their crutches, because they want to live their lives to the full once more. And you are the ones who are giving them the opportunity to live again.
Like hundreds of other amputees, Israfilov Raimolu has come to Baku, the capital, to the orthopedic centre set up here by the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross of Geneva. Here, victims of anti-personnel landmines, this most inhumane of weapons, get help from qualified and dedicated specialists. Free of charge, they create and fit the prostheses that give amputees the use of their legs again. 20-year-old Ismail Kumoldov, for example, is a Tajik soldier. He lost both his legs stepping on an anti-personnel mine a month previously in his own country. Thanks to the ICRC, he's been able to come to the Azerbaijan Centre. Today, he can walk without crutches with these prostheses created in the centre's workshops. Miguel and Alexandra Fernandez, man and wife, are Portuguese. Qualified orthopedic specialists, they have worked for more than 8 years for the ICRC, serving in Angola, Mozambique and Cambodia, where anti-personnel mines continue to wreak their havoc. Here in Azerbaijan, they share their knowledge and experience with local technicians trained on the job. The Azerbaijan Red Crescent has already taken part in the project, organising dormitories for the disabled people who come here. The aim of the project is in fact to hand over the centre to the local Red Crescent once Azeri technicians have been properly trained.
The people working here receive practical training in orthopedics. The majority of our amputees are war victims wounded by landmines. One of the main aims of the program is to train local staff so they'll be able to carry on the program when the ICRC leaves. The principal idea is to make the most of local expertise and to make the program autonomous using technology developed by the ICRC. It's based on the minimum number of basic parts. The feet, the knees and the detachable parts are all made locally.
Using inexpensive materials available locally, the ICRC has been able to create strong, well-fitting prostheses at less than a tenth of the price of the highly sophisticated models made in the West. It's an important point for countries like this, often very poor, but where tens of thousands of landmine victims are in need of prostheses.
I would like to ask him and to speak with him about one.
Pierre Daube is French. Qualified in law and political science, he is an ICRC delegate. Today he's visiting this poor and run-down neighbourhood, which is home for several thousand refugees who have found shelter here in these half-constructed buildings without water or sanitation. There are some 700,000 refugees in Azerbaijan, more accurately called displaced persons, for though they've had to abandon their homes because of the war, they've not left their country. Pierre Daube has come to speak to them about the dangers of anti-personnel landmines. For though the ICRC is closely involved in caring for the victims of these murderous weapons, it is convinced that it's better to prevent the damage in the first place.
The front lines now are mined. When there are peace accords, sooner or later there will be movements of people. So the aim is to inform the population. There is a real problem, the mines are there, and to give them some practical advice for when they go back to these potentially dangerous areas.
These refugees have only one hope, to go back home as soon as possible. But despite all the efforts of the ICRC, for some of them, going home will mean going to their deaths. Landmines do not respect ceasefires.
The situation is really intolerable. According to the latest estimates, it would take more than 1,000 years to demine the whole world. It's a weapon that does not distinguish between soldiers, civilians, children, women. It respects no rules. Once it's in the ground, its sole purpose is to kill or maim, and that's true as long as the mine remains in the ground.
So it's truly a seed of death.
Yes, it's a seed that kills and maims. It's the worst enemy of humanitarian law. It's totally unaffected by it.
The ICRC has also produced a TV advertisement on the dangers of landmines, which has been widely broadcast in all the former Soviet republics affected by ethnic and political conflict. But again, in the spirit of prevention is better than cure, Pierre Daube speaks to soldiers and their officers from a number of former Soviet republics on the basic principles of international humanitarian law and the legalities of war. Though it may be impossible to prevent conflict, international humanitarian law aims to minimize the negative effects of war on the civil population, prisoners of war and the wounded. In particular, it requires maps to be created of where landmines have been set. Along with other international organizations, the ICRC is working towards getting a total ban on the production and deployment of anti-personnel landmines. Indeed, military experts are increasingly suggesting that these horrifying and inhumane weapons are ineffective. The United Nations Development Programme, the UNDP in particular, is carrying out demining operations in a number of countries which suffer from this aftermath of war. Israfilov Raimolu is neither an expert in humanitarian law nor a soldier, but his own words well express the horror and absurdity of war and these seeds of death which go on killing and mutilating thousands of victims.
War is a terrible thing, and it's the young people who are its first victims. The politicians who are responsible for the wars should think about what they do and remember that what's happening to these young people could also happen to their children. The people want peace. War, every war, just brings unhappiness, suffering and tragedy. But whatever the war, it's not the politicians who are responsible who suffer, but the poor, ordinary people, like us.